Hello there. Good morning. My name is Deborah McLaren. I am the MD of Love Reading for Kids. I am absolutely delighted today to welcome you to this chat about multilingualism in schools. It's an area that we've been looking to delve into for quite some time at Love Reading for Kids. And I couldn't have anyone better today to join me to talk about it than Dr. Sabine Little, who is a senior lecturer in languages education at the University of Sheffield. That's where she researches how multilingual children experience their world growing up, spanning with home, school, the community, and their online experience. Via Sabine's Lost Worlds project, she shares ideas for teachers working in multilingual settings and has been called upon to provide talks, workshops, consultancy with everyone from the NEU to the Primary Languages Network, to the Youth Libraries Group, the International Baccalaureate Organisation, and now Love Reading for Kids. She also co-convenes the Literacy and Multilingualism Specialist Group for the UK Literacy Association. Serena, you obviously don't get time to sleep. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me and for inviting me to the chat. It's lovely to be here.
No, it's great. And I feel like it's been a long time coming, right? Because although I hadn't connected the dots at first, we were first in touch many moons ago, weren't we? When your son, Toby, was a reviewer for Love Reading for Kids.
He was, yeah. It goes back about 10 years, I think. 8 years, something like that.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I know that you have used over that time Love Reading for Kids as a resource in your work as well. So it feels like this was meant to be.
It was.
So I would love to just talk through today just some of the elements, of the work that you've been consumed with over the past years. And I know that as part of that work, you did a piece with the National Literacy Trust where you included questions related to multilingualism as part of their national literacy survey. And that obviously is all about improving our understanding of how children from multilingual backgrounds live their reading lives. I'd love you to tell us more about that and what that entailed.
Yeah, it was such a fantastic opportunity because obviously the National Literacy Survey is pretty much the biggest opportunity we have to understand on a large scale how our children in the country experience reading. And so when it was in 2020, we had a chance to collaborate on adding a few questions. As you can imagine, the National Literacy Survey is always in high demand to try and get information about certain groups or certain initiatives, etc. So when we had a chance to include some questions around multilingual readers, it was fantastic as an opportunity to look into not just multilingual reading, but also then to correlate some of those questions with each other and to understand whether and how children who speak multiple languages and read in multiple languages experience reading in a different way to children who might only read in one language. And some of the things we found were really interesting. So, for example, even when children said that they did not enjoy reading, when asked whether they enjoyed reading in their home or heritage language, they said that yes, they did. So they were more likely to be motivated to read in their home or heritage language than necessarily in the classroom language. Now, this is a quantitative survey. We didn't get a chance to follow up, but I have some theories around maybe being asked to read in school and that being linked to certain pressures, etc., whereas reading in the home and heritage language doesn't necessarily have those same curricular pressures. So it might be that it's something that is less restricted or less governed by external influences and therefore maybe a bit freer and a bit more fun to negotiate. We also sadly found that some of our pupils are still getting bullied on the basis of their language, and that I think sends really strong messages to schools to include multilingualism in a positive way in the classroom, because from my work, not necessarily just with the National Literacy Trust, but a lot of bullying obviously happens due to a lack of understanding and this feeling of othering and otherness.
Yeah.
So it's not a case of celebrating multilingualism. Multilingualism isn't something that comes out for International Mother Language Day or European Day of Languages. Multilingualism is all around us. So it's not celebratory. What we need to do is we need to normalize it in our classrooms. So as a day-to-day affair, rather than something that comes out on Chinese New Year.
Wow, no, that's a really, you're absolutely right. It's such an interesting point. And I suppose that it, you know, if we think about how, you know, the teachers, you know, can make that happen. I know that you did a Rivers of Multilingual Reading paper, didn't you? And that led to many schools using that methodology to think about how we make multilingualism or multilingual reading visible in the classroom. And that's surely about making it a day in, day out, as you say, you know, normal state of play. Is that part of what you recommend? And it'd be good to understand what that looks like.
There are so many activities that are easily adaptable for multilingual learners, and it's not an either or scenario. It's not about, oh, just talk to us about your languages, and it's not about disadvantaging children who might only grow up speaking one language in the home. But the Rivers of Reading is a great example. Just briefly to explain to those who are not aware of it, a River of Reading is basically inviting a child, or anybody really, to create a somewhat chronological account of what reading was important throughout your life. So think back as early as you can and identify, well, which book did you have to take out from the library 20 times in a row? Which was the one that your mum had to read or your dad had to read until their voice got sore? And to think back about as you go through life. I had a book that had a massive impact on me about a young girl who wanted to become a knight. And to me, that sort of spelt me from a working class background, implied that, oh, if you really tried, you could try and work towards things, even if they're not part of your I don't know, your socioeconomic makeup or whatever. And a River of Reading looks at that throughout life. Now, what we found is with multilingual children, when we ask, why is that book important, or why is that piece of reading important, we found that monolingual children would mainly put their favorites into their River of Reading. So their River of Reading is like a collection. Oh, this was my favorite book when I was 4. This was my favorite book when I was 5. This was my favorite book when I was 8, etc. For multilingual learners, what I found in my study is that their reasons for including books are much more socially negotiated and constructed, and linguistically as well. So they included books because they traveled with them from one country to the next. So this book was imbued with meaning. I mean, it might have traveled because it was a favorite book, but that became secondary to, I brought this in my suitcase when we moved to a different country. There were also a lot of firsts. So this was the first book I managed to read in English without help. This was the first book I read after I arrived in the country. This was the first book that my mum and I read together in the heritage language. And we, all these kinds of firsts, and also connections to people. So who gave you the book? And through that, we make visible routes to different places, different family members, etc. Yeah. So what starts out as a talk to me about your reading, for a teacher can become a really insightful way of understanding not just what a child reads, but also the journey that they have had, not just as a reader, but as a potential migrant, as somebody growing up with multiple languages in the home, the level of confidence they feel in different languages, all based on the conversations that are being had on the back of this one activity.
I love that. And actually, I want to do my own River of Reading, and that's the great thing, I suppose, about that. Going back to what you were saying before about normalizing it and removing the otherness, that is something that the whole class can do. It may heighten and have different signposts for the multilingual children, but that works right across the group, doesn't it? Love it. Oh, I'm going to do my own River of Reading.
I'd love to see it.
So you've also got your Lost Worlds project, haven't you? Which is a really big part of what you've been doing. And I was diving into this in preparation for our chat, and this is again about more ideas for teachers working in multilingual settings. So talk to me, and we will signpost this, with the blog that goes with this chat. But talk to us about the Lost Worlds project for us and share what you've been doing.
The Lost Worlds project, the L is in brackets. It's tricky to do that verbally or audibly. So the idea initially came from the Lost Words book from Robert Macfarlane and Jackie Morris, which was obviously hugely successful in every primary school. And the idea that words are being lost. And when the book came out, I started to think our multilingual children are losing words if they are not enabled to maintain their home or heritage language. They are losing words, not nature-related words, but everyday words. And with that, they lose part of their world. So that's why there you go. So that's why the L for the Lost Worlds project is in brackets. So it leans, again, with permission. I did ask Robert and Jackie but before I named the project thus. But the principle is the same. The idea that through losing the connection to vocabulary, the ways we talk about things, we lose the connection to the thing itself. And for multilingual learners, there is this idea that, of course, if you lose the connection to be able to speak to your grandparents or even your parents, part of my research is about links between language and identity. So if you feel less confident in one of your languages than in the other, what does that do to your sense of belonging that you feel to that community?
Yeah.
So the Lost Worlds project is basically a call to action for teachers, again, to normalize multilingualism, but to say, I realize this might feel tricky if you're not a linguist yourself, or if you're not multilingual yourself. So it is a curated group of activities it started off mainly because of the Lost Words link with nature-related activities. It's now branched out a little bit. But it's anything from as simple as if you're in a primary class and your children are drawing something and are labeling it afterwards, just ask them to label it in all their languages. And that, again, gives you a really quick understanding of whether they can write the language as well as they can speak it, where the gaps are. Can they label something in their home language but not in English? And then you understand that it's a vocabulary issue, not a subject knowledge issue, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
And similarly, if there's words that they know in English but not in the home language, it gives an opportunity to pick up with parents and engage them and say, well, why didn't you fill this in at home? Talk to your parents and get it filled in. So this is just one example of there's poetry activities on there. There's songs. There's essays. It's aimed at primary, but I know it's been used successfully up to at least year 9, 10. And there's some that have a social justice element about changing something environmentally in your community, for example. So there's a whole range of activities out there, and with the aim to make it as easy as possible for teachers. So there are lesson plans on there, which you can obviously use or disregard, however, and if there's worksheets related to it, then the worksheets are available, and it's all for free. There's no cost involved whatsoever.
It's an incredible resource. Well done. Congratulations. I really think it's a great achievement, and I'm sure there are tons of teachers, that already get value, but I'm really excited to be able to help get the message out there, because I think this is so important. And I think there's such a need for it.
There is. I've been really excited. What I've been really excited about was when I've been working with schools for sanctuary, and the idea that the activities are signed off by schools of sanctuary, basically, that if a school is looking for schools of sanctuary badging, the award, then doing these activities is part of the evidence that can be submitted to say, yes, look, we are normalizing linguistic diversity. We are supporting pupils from migration, including refugee backgrounds, and help them in integrating all their languages into their learning.
No, it's absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. So thank you for sharing that. So another part of your research, you did some work with Sheffield libraries and you helped them establish a multilingual children's library, which then went on to win the International Brenda Eastwood Award for Diversity and Inclusion. Now, obviously, we're going to have a lot of teachers and librarians watching this event, looking for advice on how to either establish a multilingual library or improve what they currently have. I know it's a big question, and I know it's something we're going to follow up as a bigger piece after today. But what are maybe the top things that you would advise to do as a starting point?
Yeah, I'm so grateful to Sheffield Libraries for when I came to them and I said, "Oh, can we try and do this?" They welcomed me with open arms, and I've just recently had another meeting with them actually to continue our work on this. So it is one of my favorite projects that I've ever worked on. I've since advised a number of schools and libraries. I think in terms of top tips or top takeaways, I would say make it a community effort. So if you're a library, connect to local heritage language schools, try and identify cultural organizations that are nearby that might have a vested interest in making this work. The whole project works a lot better if you have cultural brokers that can open doors into certain communities. If you're in a school, work with the parents and say, this is what we're looking to establish. Don't be surprised if there is some comeback where parents are confused and might think schools are for English and the home is for the home language. So there might be some reassurance work that needs to happen. Some parents are really on board with it, and others are worried that their child might not be learning English if there is a focus on the home language. But this is a good example where teachers can really explain to families that it's not either or, it's additive, it feeds off each other. So I think working with the community, and that includes, I'm very much aware that we live in times where very few people have got the budget that they would like to have. So that in schools and both in libraries as well, this includes potentially looking for donations from the local community. I realize that is a very hit and miss approach to get a library going, but it is actually what we did at Sheffield. We did not have a budget to purchase books. So the library came into being on the basis of donations. I would also say, think about ways, this is not a case of build it and they will come, because unless it's already been advertised in this way, libraries, school libraries are typically associated with societal languages. So here with English. So if there is an alternative offer being made, if the offer becomes more inclusive, that needs to go down into the social conscience. And that takes a little while. So see if you can tie it in with things like multilingual storytelling. There is an activity for that on the Lost Worlds website. There's also on the website a downloadable certificate and a little reading passport where children can read 6 books, and they just write down the title, they give it a 5-star rating, you put a little stamp in, and once they've got their 6 books, they get the certificate, which is also on the website. So to sort of tie it into some recognition in the research study, one thing I was really interested in was how certificates, and we had a little medal as well as part of the project, but how they became artifacts that could transcend different spheres that a child inhabits. So they got the medal from the library for multilingual reading, and that enabled them to take it into school and say, look, I've been rewarded for reading in several languages. And that gave the school, oh, this is great. So again, it enables this artifactual, making literacy and reading visible, that I found really useful. One thing, especially for libraries, is to be mindful that when we traditionally look at what makes a library successful, we look at borrowing figures. And something we found in this study is that we need new success measurements for multilingual books, because the families were reading them in the library because they wanted their child to see that their home language had a space, was worthy of space in a public setting like a library. So they didn't want to take it home because that's where the home language was already anyway. So they didn't borrow it. They'd read it there and then. And equally, because the families were very much aware that there was limited stock available. In some languages, there would have only been 4 or 5 books. So they didn't want to take it away from a different family. So they read it there and then they put it back on the shelf for somebody else to enjoy. And both of these are great reasons, but both of these reasons mean that they never made it onto borrowing figures. So, and I've just recently had a meeting with the library to think about how do we can't say it's not being used because the shelves are changing. You can obviously see that it's changing. So how can we measure success in this context? So thinking a bit creatively about this. And then finally, maybe to communicate with lots of people about how to get hold of books, because some languages are obviously trickier to get hold of than other. I'm very much aware that there will be people right now screaming at the screen going, this language hasn't even got a written publishing history. I know it's hard. I really do know. But there are also opportunities, especially in schools, but also in libraries, to create some books with children. So to run a storytelling event with families or to ask children to work with families to write a story down, to illustrate those themselves. And then the feeling of pride that a child has. My son did this years and years ago as part of the summer reading challenge. It was Mythical Maze. So I can't pinpoint when it was, but it was whenever it was the Mythical Maze. He did a book about it. It was just stapled together and he took it to the library to show and they put it on the shelf.
Oh.
And his sense of pride and accomplishment. So if there is a chance for children to create books that can then be enjoyed by others in different languages, that is again an opportunity to grow the stock. And I'm also really, really happy for anybody to get in touch with any questions or thoughts or needs of help. And it's something I'm really passionate about. So if there's a multilingual library or a multilingual box in a classroom that can help get set up, I would love to hear from people.
I love that. I absolutely love that an idea. And I think you're right, that creativity is needed because that is that worthy of space. You're absolutely right. That's the word, isn't it? Why isn't my language, why isn't there anything in my language in this space? And they need to feel that, they belong, that sense of belonging, removing that otherness and having that space for as many languages as we can have. Great. It's really great. Now, I know that, and I'm really excited about one of the things we're doing as a follow-on from today is you're going to be joining our expert review panel, which I'm absolutely delighted about. And you're going to be working with us to ensure we enhance this element of our offering on Love Reading for Kids. We know there aren't a huge amount of titles, but we are reaching out to publishers saying, please let us know about your multilingual offering because we will be selecting books every month in this area. And to coincide with the publication of this event, Sabine has created a reading list of great multilingual reads right across the age ranges. So, do you want to talk a little bit about that, Sabina?
Yeah, I think for me, it's mainly about, obviously, everybody knows about multilingual picture books, for example, bilingual picture books where you've got the same story in different languages. But there is also a thankfully increasing number of books that brings in linguistic diversity as part of the story. At the moment, less so. It's maybe slightly tricky to weave in when language is not part of the story. So to have casual multilingualism, I think, is an additional target for the future. But there are some books which, mainly when they talk about migration, include now at least some words in different languages. So one example of that, for example, it came out fairly recently, The Rock in My Throat by Cao Yang, which has got some Huang in the language, in the book. And I actually know there was a bit of a a bit of a press hoo-ha about it, because the words that are included are not translated right there and then. They're translated at the back. And that left a sense of unease in casual readers. They're saying, oh, there's something in this book that I don't immediately understand. And I love that, because to a certain extent, it shows how readers who read a book in a language they don't feel confident and feel all the time. There are always words that they're not 100% certain about. So I found it quite telling that here, that sense of discomfort was flipped.
Yeah.
And I love the opportunity these books present to share different languages, different cultural contexts, different scripts with children, which all serve to, again, normalize that multilingual. In the UK, we're at about 25% of primary school children speaking more than one language. If you take those collectively and don't split them in different language groups, they are arguably the largest minority in any classroom. So it's high time that their linguistic diversity is represented in the books. And I'm really looking forward to working on this list in more detail, and also in publishers coming forward and sharing what they've got.
Absolutely. No, I'm really, I feel like it needs to be more front and center than it is. And you're absolutely right. That stat, it's huge. I know that my local primary, where I was the governor for 8 years, when we looked at it a few years ago and looked, in total there, I think at the time there were about 80 different, multicultural, either languages or, from country. And it was like, wow, when we start looking at that, we are not offering, the support that we should be for those families, and making, it is, you said earlier, it's not about the celebration, because it's not about celebrating that diversity, but that's what we almost try to do, isn't it? We try to celebrate, look how diverse we are, but actually it is about that normalizing of it, and offering a space for all of those to feel like they belong, and that their language is worthy of space, and that we're supporting that multicultural. This has been absolutely brilliant, Sabina. Thank you. I am really, really delighted. I'm sure everyone watching has found this a really, really useful discussion. We will follow it up with reading lists and lots more. And as I said, any publishers watching, please do get in touch. We really do want to help these books shine, and support our children and our schools and our libraries in the best possible way. Sabina, thank you.
Thank you.